Monday, February 23rd through Sunday, March 1st, 2026. We are in the thick of eclipse season. We're in the space between two eclipses. The Aquarius solar eclipse on February 17th and the Virgo total lunar eclipse on March 3rd. Eclipse windows are unique, busy, exciting times of change, but there's a lot more to it than that. We'll discuss it all. Plus, Saturn and Neptune are now here in Aries, and we're still adjusting to that. This is probably the most significant astrology of all of 2026. And it's happening during eclipse season. So we'll talk about that too today for sure. And Mercury retrograde is getting ready to kick off this week as well. Just as Saturn and Neptune have moved on. This is significant. And oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, this transit. Venus, exalted in Pisces, is forming a trine to Jupiter, which is exalted in Cancer this week. This is such a gorgeous signature. It's actually almost hard to imagine one that could be better. But as you can tell from everything else going on, everything else that I mentioned, it's not the only thing going on this week. There's a lot to talk about here. I'm excited to be here with you today. It's been a minute, so let's get into it. Before I begin, I do just want to take quick note of the weather outside the window. I won't show you for too long the snowstorm. I will get back to the chart, but we're just having such a snowstorm now. It's quite lovely. I will go back again at the end of the video, but make mention of that snowstorm out the window that you can sort of see a little bit of anyway in the window. And let me get this chart all into position so we can really see it well. And let's put some of these things on the chart. It's tricky because we can't really put the eclipses on the chart. Neither of them are occurring today, but we know that we're in the window between eclipses. There was one on February 17th. There will be another on March 3rd. So instead, I actually want to go ahead and note that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Let's put that up. Like I said, this is such major astrology, and it is such a big deal that it's happening during this eclipse window. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that we're in between two eclipses. First, I want to say that I'm going to go ahead and go through all of my astrology notes here. The snow is beautiful. I agree. Thank you so much. Channel Wellness, nice to see you. And yeah, that's why I had to show you. So nice to see a little snowstorm. I will go back at the end of this report. And what I'm also going to do at the end of this report is read through the chat. I'm going to go ahead now and go through just a few pages of astrology notes that I have here. Please leave any comments or questions in the chat, and then I'll go through that at the end. And I really look forward to that. And we'll go back to the snow for a few minutes too. Okay, so eclipse windows. We're between two different eclipses right now. So there's a lot to be said about that. When we're talking about eclipses, we're talking about beginnings and endings. Things sort of coming in and out of the spotlight, in and out of focus, getting a lot of attention. So it could be that something was getting a lot of attention, it was in the spotlight, or someone, and then suddenly they are not, or the other way around. And I like that spotlight imagery as well, Um, because it's the idea of this light that sort of is different than other light that we're used to. You know, you have all that darkness and then you have that spotlight sort of coming off and on. But the other image that I really like for it is around a strobe light. That's another light that behaves in a different way, right? It sort of comes off and on. Things come into the light, things come out of the light. Things aren't where they were a minute ago, and it can feel very disorienting. And the reason that I like that metaphor too is that that disorienting feeling can be part of an eclipse. You know, we can feel a little off as things are moving and changing and beginning and ending and coming in and out of focus in a different way. Um, a lot of times, eclipses can be felt in terms of what's happening in the collective. It's not always about us as individuals. Some eclipse cycles more than others, some eclipses more than others, depends on the individual. But it's good to note that it can be a busy time and a time of beginnings and endings and disorienting and all of that, not in terms of what's going on for us personally, but sometimes things that are going on around us, things that are happening in the world, in the collective, as they say. Um, you know, when there is big change in our own life that feels sudden or unexpected, there are around eclipses. There are a few sort of things to keep in mind. Um, you know, as a general rule, things that are really right for us, where we're on the right path, where we're supposed to be, those things will get a bit of a boost during eclipse season. And the movement that we experience could be those aspects moving forward quickly, us getting a little bit of a boost there, a little support, a little forward progress. And then things that aren't quite right could be sort of eclipsed away. They could end or they could change. And sometimes it's surprising. Sometimes we don't always realize um, the positive side of it right away. It might be hard to recognize right away how ultimately this is going to lead to something good. Or also, I think it's also always good to keep in mind that sometimes the good is for someone else, you know, and we can always find that good. We can always look at a situation and find the side of it that is positive and where it's positive. Sometimes it takes some searching, sometimes it takes some sitting with our feelings along the way and caring for ourselves along the way and giving ourselves a bit of time. But I think ultimately being able to see how the things that moved and changed quickly during an eclipse season were sort of supportive and ultimately bringing us support for the things that were right and moving us away from things that were not. I think that can be a helpful approach. I definitely don't like avoiding doing things during eclipse season. Sometimes it just, when there's a lot of astrology like this, including this Saturn Neptune conjunction, it can just sort of feel like, oh my gosh, you know, it's overwhelming. Like, let's just kind of not do anything and see what happens. And, you know, but we want to allow eclipse season to move us. First of all, don't, no fear, no fear. We don't want to be in fear. That's not a great energy. It's the opposite of a good energy. And we always want to be putting out what we want to bring in. We will be bringing in whatever we're putting out ultimately in many ways. And uh, it's about doing the work. It's about doing the work being what we do in our lives and also having the right attitude and approach. Anyway, I think that moving through eclipse season with that good attitude, ready to make decisions, ready to let the time move you a little bit, ready to do some work, way better approach than trying not to do anything. Well, we don't want to do anything out of fear. Second of all, eclipses are meant to move us. Things are meant to come in and out during those times. So allow that work to happen. You don't want to block that. You know, we can all have different relationship to change and at different times in our lives as well. But just as a general rule. And you know, this particular eclipse cycle is really interesting because we're between this eclipse season, I should say, because we're sort of between two different eclipses. Um, we just had our first eclipse in the Aquarius part of the chart along the Aquarius Leo axis. But the nodes are still here. Let me note the nodes. Um, that's how I note the eclipses. What was I thinking? I can just, oh, I like to sometimes use this one like this. I can note this, okay? So our eclipse axis is still, the nodes are still in Pisces, Virgo. These points, these nodes, for anyone, I always try to do this astrology channel in such a way that if you're learning astrology, you can follow along with all of that and hopefully it's helpful. And that if you just want to listen to the astrology and sort of ignore that piece, that these videos work for you too. So I try not to be too heavy-handed on either side and just so you know where I'm trying to find that balance there. So the nodes here are where eclipses happen. That's what they show in the sky. They show the point in the sky where when the sun and the moon line up there, there'll be an eclipse. But they have a pretty big wide orb of influence of about, I mean, I hear different things, 12 degrees, 18 degrees. People will debate. But we can still have eclipses in a sign where the nodes are adjacent because the sun and the moon can line up, you know, just a little bit off. And that's what happened with this past eclipse. The nodes are moving into, let me put my little arrows up. The nodes are moving into Aquarius and Leo. And we will have eclipses there for the next few years. So we had our first eclipse in that series in Aquarius in February. And now in March, on March 3rd, we will have an eclipse in Virgo. Back here where the South Node still remains. We've been having eclipses there, and there's still a couple more to come. So I think it's interesting. You know, there's something about sort of our relationship with the collective with this pairing. It's very interesting. There's a way in which the Aquarius North Node and the Virgo South Node, even though that's not exactly where they are now, that's where the eclipses are. There's a way in which that makes sense to me together. There's a certain detachment, but service to both of these signatures. With Aquarius, we can have a little bit of emotional detachment, but so future thinking and loving of humanity as a whole, right? Aquarius energy is about humanitarianism and about the group. And sometimes that means that when we have where we have Aquarius energy, or if we have a lot of Aquarius energy, we can feel apart from the group. That's part of the theme that this energy works with. But in terms of these eclipses, there's that energy around processing. What does this mean for everyone? Where are we all going? What part am I playing in this bigger picture? And then the South Node in Virgo has been helping us to release the more challenging sides of Virgo signature. And I think that one of the hardest sides of Virgo signature is, at first glance, it can look like being too hard on themselves and others. You know, it can look like that. It can look like being too much of a perfectionist, or over planning and overdoing and all releasing all of that has been a part of this eclipse work, for many of us, I'm sure. But I think the hardest thing about it sometimes can be when when Virgo energy sort of gets stuck in, why is this happening? In being sort of critical, in being sort of judgmental of problems rather than just understanding sort of what needs to be done to solve them. The highest vibe of Virgo can be, I see this problem in front of me. It doesn't really matter why it's here. It's here. And I know what I can do about it. You know, sort of this idea of like, if someone's walking through the rain and you have an umbrella, an extra umbrella, you give them the umbrella because you have an extra and you already have one. But life is more complicated than that. And we tend to twist that metaphor around and think, well, when I was walking in the rain, no one handed me an umbrella, or I paid for this umbrella. And so I shouldn't, I don't know what I'm getting a little twisted in my words, but I hope I'm making sense. My metaphors are spinning in on each other. But just like Aquarius energy sort of has a detachment that allows for care, Virgo has the same thing. It's sort of on a highest level we can let go of with that South Node in Virgo, needing to understand why the problem happened or who started it or who to blame for it, and just say, here we are with this problem and here's what I can do to help. And then when this energy, when we help with wherever, we all have Virgo in our chart somewhere, and we're all working with this Virgo eclipse energy now, then wherever you put that energy in, that's the highest way in which service can be rewarding, right? Not from like, oh, they like, well, I'm going to stop the metaphor now. But when we give from that place of doing what needs to be done, seeing how we can be helpful on a practical level. Virgo is so helpful on a practical level. So there's just something about that, you know, and I said a lot about these eclipses in my video that I did with my friend Corinne, and that wasn't something I was trying to articulate it then, and I feel like I just sort of started to understand it now. So I wanted to say it a little bit more here. It's very hard to separate the fact that we're in this eclipse window from the fact that we have this Saturn-Neptune signature as well. Saturn and Neptune just moved into Aries. Can we take a quick break to look at the snow? It's snowing so hard and so windy. I'm going to put the phone up again for a quick second. Camera. It's almost sort of hard to see because maybe it's a little bit foggy or there's a little bit of water on the window as well. I hope that was fun and not bad. Okay. So the thing is, when I think about this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, in the context of what I was just saying about the eclipses, it's actually so different. It's actually so different, right? We're talking about Aries. We're talking about the individual here. And that is a very different signature than what I was just saying about sort of that separation, that humanitarian, seeing our place, wanting to give from that place of service. There's something about this early Aries signature being activated that certainly has a self-focus to it that I find very interesting. Okay, so there's those two different signatures at the same time. And you know, it's just a lot of adjustment. It's just a lot of adjustment. If you feel like you're sort of trying to adjust, like, do things feel a little bit different than they did in, say, November, you know? And that wasn't really that long ago. And it's also crazy, can I say, that it will be March this week. I feel like February, I know it's a short month, but went by awfully quickly. Um, so Saturn and Neptune together in Aries, it's a new dream, and then it's the building of that dream in a new reality. There are different ways that this signature can show up. I know that those energies are very different, but one of the highest potentials of it is the idea of sort of Neptune bringing in that dream, bringing in those ideas, bringing in that vision, and then Saturn, through sometimes showing what doesn't work, through restriction, finds a way and sort of helps, is signifying that we're helping to bring it down into actual experience. You know, we're having this new idea and we're understanding where it's realistic and where it isn't and finding a way to bring it down. But it is very much us showing up for ourselves, us listening to our inner voice. It is the individual. It is wanting to get going, even if we don't know the path. It is not really stopping and thinking about everything and everyone and all of that all the time, the way that that eclipse energy just suggested. So I think that's good. I think that both together are perhaps finding balance, the same way in which the Saturn Neptune is finding balance between dreaming and being realistic. You know, it can be quite useful to have energies that balance each other out in these ways to sort of keep us remembering all the different sides of the equation. And then Venus and Jupiter are in a trine this week, all week. When I said in the beginning that I don't know what color to use. It's too pretty. It's too beautiful. Let's use this pretty blue. Um, when I said earlier in this report that it's hard to imagine a better transit, you know, a more lovely transit, I really meant it. Because Venus and Jupiter in a trine to each other is wonderful and supportive and lovely in and of itself. And then Venus is in the best part of the chart that she could possibly be in. Venus is in Pisces. Venus is exalted in Pisces. This is Venus's favorite place to be. Venus is Venusing here, right? Venus can be super Venus, and all of that sort of the highest signatures of Venus are sort of amplified in Pisces by Pisces. And I always think of Venus in Pisces as, oh, it's so nice. It's so lovely. It's calm. It's a calm energy. There's a sweetness to Venus and Pisces. There's certainly a beauty to Venus and Pisces, balance, ease, uh, smiles, and warmth, and relationship and connection. And it is a very sweet signature to have in a birth chart, or a chart like we're using today, a transit chart. And then Jupiter in Cancer. This is Jupiter's favorite place to be. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Jupiter is Jupitering in Cancer. Jupiter is extra Jupiter, which means expansion and luck and growth. And, you know, in Cancer, it's just felt so there's been something about safety and security coming in, an understanding of a feeling of belonging, of trying to move our nervous systems from survive mode into thrive mode, understanding the importance of doing that for supporting everything else that's going on. Um, it's been a lovely process with Venus, with Jupiter in Cancer. We're sort of getting ready for Jupiter to go direct soon in March and have our final few months of Jupiter in Cancer here, but we're really right in the middle of the process. Jupiter at 15 degrees. We still have a few more months, and I think those months could be really productive toward that energy. So how lovely. It's like we have this eclipse energy sort of intensely reminding us that we are in a big time of change, that there's a lot moving and changing and shifting in the world right now, that we're at the beginning of a new era. And of course, that means we have a lot to say about how that new era goes. We're all contributing to it. And then the Saturn and Neptune is like, but okay, are you okay? Am I okay? Let's make sure I'm okay. Let's make sure I'm listening to my calling. Let's make sure I'm listening to my voice, that there's some sort of dream coming in, with this practical support from Saturn after the whole process of wrapping up in Pisces and all the different endings that we were talking about for so long. Now there's more conversation about beginnings in astrology, because we're at the beginning with all of these outer planets shifting. We're still sort of getting there. Uranus is still in Taurus. Couple more months of that transition, but more and more we're kicking off really fully into this new time. So, such an interesting balance. And then we have the Venus and the Jupiter trine, just sort of creating this like lovely support in the background, and this sweetness and this luck and this positivity. It's so interesting because, in a way, of course, I wish it wasn't during so much intensity, but also great. Thank you. Yes, come in right now while we have all this other stuff going on. I think it's helpful. And a Mercury in retrograde, Mercury, excuse me, blip, blip, blip. That was a Mercury in retrograde like thing to say. Mercury goes retrograde in Pisces on February 26th, and it will be retrograde there until March 20th. So I did discuss Mercury retrograde in the February reports a lot more than the March reports. So you might want to check those out by rising sign, best viewed by rising sign if you know your rising sign. But I just think it's so much emotional processing. I just think it's emotional processing. It's like all of these Pisces planets in general. Saturn and Neptune have just left this sign, and now we have Venus and Pisces, and there was a conjunction with the North Node, which is quite lovely, and Mercury retrograde working through here. It's like there's emotional processing to be done after eclipse season, after Saturn and Neptune leaving the sign. The Pisces part of the chart looks really different now than it did a few months ago, and I think this Mercury retrograde might be a little bit of an opportunity amongst all this other excitement going on to actually sort of mentally slow down a little bit. And I say opportunity, it doesn't seem like that would be an opportunity, but sometimes we have to let things process. Sometimes there's other things to listen to other than our logic. Sometimes we have to listen to our intuition. We have to understand our emotions. We have to move our emotions. Welcome to Pisces season, you know? Pisces season, I always recommend things with water, drinking plenty of water, walking near water, showers. It can be very soothing, and a little bit of healthy escapism during Pisces season can sort of stave off unhealthy escapism. A good movie and going to bed early, or listening to a wonderful album on a extra long drive by yourself where you took the long way instead of going the short way. So you could listen to the album, or I don't know, whatever it is. The sort of healthy escapism sometimes can just sleeping more. Pisces time, it's good to sleep more. And snowstorms apparently are also right on time for Pisces season. That's what we've got. We've got the water happening here. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the chat now. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know, and I will try to show out the window while I'm doing it. But I don't think I can anymore. Look, it's just gotten too. You can't see out here anymore. So there's nothing really to see. And there's not that much really in the chat either, but it's so nice to see you. So nice to see everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful week